Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Father Alexander Har, Rector of St. John the Divine in Sun City Center, Florida.
And I am rector of All Angels by the Sea. This is Dave Marshall on Longboat Key. Today is garbage day, which means traffic backs up because nobody can get around the garbage cans. Still, beautiful day to be on the island.
So we're going with weather reports and municipal traffic reports.
Oh, you got to throw the municipal stuff in there. Yeah, it's it's kind of funny how that works. But anyway, but it's such a great place just to stop and ponder instead of always acting and doing. To be behind a garbage can and go, oh, look what a beautiful day it is. Garbage truck, not garbage can.
Well, before we,
That kind of fits into our lesson. But this is, Alex, what are we doing today?
This is a Bridge Between. It's the podcast where we bridge our knowledge of the Gospels, bridge our physical distance, and you're going to be bridging some significant distance by car.
By car. There will be bridges. I will be driving. But yeah.
Yes.
So while you all are listening to this, my son and I will be driving from California back to Florida. So I'm sure I will have lots of stories to share when I get back. But I don't know if you've ever have you driven across country yet?
No, I have not. But you have to promise me one thing, that when you get in the car, and I will send you the link to the video of the song, that when you get in the car to start to drive back, that you play the song from Smokey and the Bandit, Eastbound and Down. That's how you start every car trip.
Perfect. I love the movie Smokey and the Bandit. I love it so much. I actually like Smokey and the Bandit 2 as well. Yeah.
Wow. That's
and
hardcore.
Is there a theme from the movie Cannonball Run? Should I be playing something like that too? But
we'll do that. We'll do that off on the break.
Yeah. Right. We'll figure that out.
But
Smokey and the Bandit. That's beautiful because we are going through the Deep South. So
exactly.
yeah, we're stopping in Mobile. There is a USS Alabama is a museum. She's a battleship, and there's a submarine there and all sorts of stuff. So we're actually going to stop and play for a while. So that'll be great.
Wonderful. But you were starting a segue, which was, when you are doing versus watching, or doing versus listening, contemplating, you might say. And that's kind of the theme of today's gospel. And you brought up something really interesting, which is Jesus enters this home of Martha and Mary, and he enters a lot of people's homes, if you notice.
He does. Well, before you jump into that, my friend Linda in Chula Vista, she is saying, what are you guys talking about? This is the shortest gospel lesson of the year, and we actually can read the whole thing. Do you want to read it, or do you want me to?
Go ahead, read it.
All right. So it's Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. Jesus and his disciples entered a village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Martha had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks. So she came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But Jesus answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." Thus ends the lesson.
Yeah. So there's several dynamics here that I think are at play. But the first one is that Jesus enters a lot of people's homes. And one of the things that he does, he's kind of like evaluating people's hospitality.
Correct. Yep.
And so here.
Okay, but why does he do that? Is he a guy who just does it, or is there a reason for it?
Well, I think the reason he does it is to teach people about what proper hospitality looks like. And in the case of, for example, being invited to somebody's house. Okay, go ahead.
Why is that important for him to be focusing on hospitality?
Well, my opinion is that he's evaluating it as part of the kingdom of heaven, of who is included and who is excluded.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I'll go with that. Would you like to know my reason?
Go ahead.
Right. Because part of the kingdom is welcoming others. And And the difference between fellowship and hospitality. A fellowship is like having friends over to your house on 4th of July, right?
Yep.
It's fun. There's not a lot of traditional hospitality because they are your brothers, they are your friends. Hospitality is hospa is from the stranger, and so it is welcoming the stranger, helping, loving, and so hospitals welcome. They're not fellowship centers. Hospitals welcome in the stranger to heal them, and that the call of the church, and certainly one of the best popes ever, Pope Gregory the Great, had asserted that the church is a hospital. It is a place of welcome for strangers to be healed, and that this is the movement of the church. And it's nothing new. I mean, Jesus is drawing all of this from his Jewishness, from his religious tradition and background. That you are light to the nations, like the sense of that you are to welcome and to help others, and to remember that once you too were a stranger and an alien, and that so this sense of hospitality is what the church, what this whole movement is built upon. And so I think for me, it's natural for Jesus then to go into homes and to correct them in their hospitality so that the movement will grow and do what the movement has done.
Well, I think it's a deep sense of accountability that Jesus wants to show that his concept of the kingdom is the one that needs to win out.
Yeah.
And so when he goes into Martha's house, it's kind of like saying, well, listen, it's all fair, right? If I'm going to critique some people, I've got to critique everybody. And in this case, Martha, I appreciate being here. I appreciate being in Bethany with my disciples. Thanks for feeding us. But your critique is off base. Your concept of hospitality is about doing, which is important. And this is kind of where we equivocate a lot between the Martha and the Mary, that we all need to be a little bit of Martha and a little bit of Mary. But for the sake of the discussion today, I'm thinking we need to be focusing more on being like Mary versus being like Martha.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think the tendency for Americans, at least, that Martha was distracted by her many tasks. And that sense, so are we, that Americans aren't particularly good at sitting around and reflecting and watching the clouds go by. And, that we don't like to do that. And this story it's, again, a short story. Luke is the only one to include it. But it is speaking right to the heart of those who are distracted by the many things that they have going on. So,
But
in
let's
direct comparison
but
to,
let's dig deeper on that.
okay,
So let's dig deeper on that, because one of the things that we talked about before we got started is that Martha is doing the things of ministry, right? In terms of some of the wordage.
Yeah. So where that comes from is that there are a couple things. Can I jump in for a moment?
Yeah, go ahead. That's why I'm asking you to. Yeah.
Okay. So the Jewish annotated New Testament, the study Bible that is looking at the New Testament based on Jewish practices of the first century, the way that this is written is that this house is Martha's. She is a home owner.
Yep.
And for anybody who thought back in Jesus's day that women were second-class citizens, although often treated that way, here we have a homeowner. Paul later will run into a woman who owned her own business. That Mary, who anointed Jesus's feet with very expensive perfume, she had the ability to raise capital and to buy that. So when Paul writes that in Christ there is no longer male or female, the sense that women are very much involved in the movement. So the Jewish annotated New Testament is talking about back in those days, women actually received and gave instruction in synagogues. They had a patronage capacity. They were involved in personal conversations. That women were involved in all this. So here we have a homeowner, and her sister is with her. Jesus then corrects Martha's homeowner hospitality side the same way he corrects the men and the houses that he goes into with men. That there is no partiality. That Jesus will correct Martha the same way he corrects another homeowner. Oh,
But
and I
it's
didn't even get to the
the
Polon
ministry part.
diaconon. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's what I'm saying. Go to that.
right. I'm sorry, I got so wrapped up in that. And so Luke writing the story in Greek, we have translated that she was concerned about her many tasks, and the tasks is a diakononin, which is where we get the word diaconate or ministry from.
Right.
And so she was, the one way you can say is she was distracted by her much serving or her much ministry. And it
Thank you.
highlights back into she's a homeowner and she's used to these type of these, what we would call ministry.
So this is the point that I want to make in bringing these words together. The concept of what her role was as the person who has in charge of hospitality, but also in terms of diaconia or ministry,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, is that when you serve in the church and you are busy in the church, there's this temptation to just remain in busyness,
Mm-hmm.
to just be overloaded and to just be completely overwhelmed by work. So much so that it takes away from prayer.
Oh, yes.
And so when you see this dichotomy being played out by Jesus about Martha and Mary, he's saying, Martha, you're distracted by these things, so much so that you've lost the fact that the Savior of the world is in your house.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
if I come to your house and you're just constantly running around and shifting around and you're
Mm-hmm.
not paying any attention to me as your guest,
Mm-hmm.
why did I come over?
Mm-hmm.
Right? If all of our lives as clergy, as lay leaders, as people preaching with our lives, if all it is about one task, then the next task, then the next task, what's the point?
What is the point of it?
You
Mm-hmm.
know, so that's what I really want people to take away from this gospel reading is that yes, ministry is important. Having people work in the church is important. Everything from volunteering in the office to the altar guild, all those things are important.
Vital.
But
Mm-hmm.
if doing those things causes you or I to lose the focus of our faith, which is the contemplation of Jesus, which is placing our focus on Jesus and his presence in our lives, then we are just another organization. We are just another nonprofit. There is no point to our existence.
Right. Exactly. Um, I, that's perfect. It also reminds me of the movie Twister. Have you seen Twister?
I love Twister.
I love Twister, right? And I don't know why it was on TV the other day, and so we started watching. And they went to the friend's house, and she made a whole bunch of food for everybody. Do you remember
Yep.
that scene?
Hmm.
Yeah, she was sitting with them and eating with them. She
Right.
wasn't in the kitchen running around. And we know later on. By the way, I'm going to ruin part of the movie if you haven't seen Twister. Is that surprise? Her house gets hit by a twister, and they come back and save her life.
Right.
But if she was just always in the kitchen serving, we would have never had that type of connection with that character. Therefore, we wouldn't have been concerned about her house being destroyed and then going in to save her life. The flip side is my dad's mom. Um, she often was serving and not sitting at the table. She had 5 kids and then grandkids, everything else. So hardly ever did we see it. And so we would wait for her to lift her fork because nobody could eat until she lifted her fork. She would just walk by, pick up the fork, and then set it down, and then circle back into the kitchen. Um, that's not the life in ministry that
No.
Jesus is calling us to go do.
Let's bring this kind of back to ground level. So if you're preaching about this on this particular Sunday, the way that I'm approaching it is asking people, what does balance in their life look like? If they're a person who is spending a lot of time ministering, a lot of volunteer hours out in the world, because, in my parish, we're a more mature population. We never use the term older. We always use the term more mature. There are people who are constantly volunteering from, sun up to sundown.
Yep.
And whenever I tell them to be still, to just stop, it feels like I'm causing them pain
Mm.
because now they're being forced to kind of sit and not be active. And it's not that I want to hurt them, but what I want them to have the experience of is allowing God to catch up. It's like they've been running all day and God has been chasing them. If they
Hmm.
stop, God just might catch up.
Yes, they were chasing the tiger, but the tiger was chasing them. But yes, so it's that's fascinating. You and I have talked about this before, where somebody, many people, got on fire with the Spirit, and they really want to start serving, and then they start serving, and then later on, they're like, you know what? I don't feel the same way I did before, and so Luke would say, it's because you're not sitting at the feet of Jesus. You started ministry by sitting at Jesus's feet, and
Right.
then you started doing all your many tasks, and you lost focus on.
But it's also possible that oftentimes we make ourselves busy because we're uncomfortable with silence. We're worried about being bored. We're a very active civilization right now where we're constantly needing stimuli. And sometimes we're also running from things. There are people I know who've endured terrible grief and they allow themselves to be caught up in a lot of activity to avoid the grief, to avoid kind of like facing the challenges that they're dealing with.
Hmm. So, what do you say to them?
Well, what I try to do is I try to talk to them and ask, how can we sit and create a space of contemplation for you where it's a safe space for you and God to interact with one another?
Hmm.
And one of the things that I encourage people to do who serve every single Sunday is I encourage them to take a Sunday off. And not just that, but that allows other people who may not be as involved to get involved in the work of the church and to cross train people in various ministries.
And to sit at the feet of Jesus.
Well, and to sit so that they can then sit at the feet of Jesus. I mean, they can actually worship.
Yeah.
This is something I used to do at my previous parish because I had another priest there. Is sometimes I would just sit in the congregation with my family and
Mm.
worship.
Hmm.
And it did two things. One, it fed me because I actually got to sit and listen to the service and listen to the sermon and sing, in my limited capacity. But also it
You
modeled,
don't have a limited capacity in singing.
well,
You
yeah,
have a lovely voice.
I can sing two notes at once. That's my issue. Um, but it also was a modeling for the congregation that even the priest needs to worship in that way as well.
You bet. That's why I'm taking this Sunday off. Is that we are supposed to? We're supposed to take 4 Sundays off, and uh, I have not been faithful in doing that for all 6 years I've been at All Angels, and I can give you all sorts of excuses why. But
Yeah.
there is no excuse, as Jesus would say, because I'm worried and distracted by many things, and there's need of one thing. Um,
Right.
so, yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering about one of my favorite stories. And actually, Alex, you brought this up at my house. So, sitting outside, I had my friend Jimmy and my friend Mike and Alex and me, the four of us. It was awesome. And there were times I said, I'm sorry, I have to get up and go do a host because I would hear the doorbell ring. But I'm
Yeah.
like, but I always wanted to come back and sit. Um, so at that time, um, it doesn't matter what was being served or what food was coming out of the oven, that Luke did not record what it was that Martha had served them or how good the food was.
Right.
That's not what they remember. They remember the fellowship. They remember the teaching, and so that's the part to focus on. And I think as time goes on, as the four of us hopefully later on get together and have more fun, and Jimmy, on your boat, uh, that or my boat. I no, I'm sorry. I should say everybody on my boat. Jimmy's boat's better and faster. But um, that when we do that again, we won't be thinking about the many tasks that took us to get there. We'll be remembering how awesome it was. And the flip side is one more thing is that when I walked into the kitchen, the women who were associated with the four men the women were in all discussing and freaking out Morgan, by the way, but that's a whole separate conversation.
We're not going to say what they were talking about. They were
We're not
having
going to
their
say,
type of conversation. Yes.
right, because
Oh,
things change as you
yeah.
get older. And anyway, so it was cool that that's the part that we remember. And likewise at church, I don't think we remember so much what we were served at coffee hour, but we remember how we were invited and welcomed, and then the conversation.
So the last thing I want to talk about in this episode is kind of shifting gears from the preaching aspect to kind of the personal aspect here,
Okay.
because part of the tradition that stems from what we associate with Mary is what's called the contemplative tradition. And that very fancy word means to, ponder, to reflect upon Jesus in such a way that Jesus permeates us
Mm-hmm.
and permeates our lives in a very powerful, spirit-filled way.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds intimidating and daunting, um, as something to take on. In one way, it is, because it's not easy to get to that place in our prayer life, but it is as simple as sitting down at the feet of Jesus. And so when I think of Mary, and this is from the Colossians reading, that Jesus is the image of the invisible God.
Mm-hmm.
We see Jesus; He is the image of the invisible God for us. So even just looking at the cross, looking at an icon of Jesus, looking at an icon of Christ, can be a way for just to take some moments and some time to enter into contemplation. It's not just reserved for monastics. It's not just reserved for saints and really, really, really holy people. It is for everyone. The challenge, though, is that it goes against our dopamine fixation that we have. Because if you use a cell phone at all, and so many of us are addicted to them, that watching them and using them for information and entertainment, we just get that fix constantly.
Right.
Contemplating Jesus is not going to give you the dopamine fix that you're looking for. It will, however, in the long run, be what gives joy and peace and love and faithfulness and all those things.
Right. That's that's a very good point, and I've been thinking about myself and our listeners, and that fact. So, your there are three ways you are listening to this, either on YouTube, on Spotify, or on Apple Music. And all three of those platforms do not let you enter into contemplation or silence. That once this clip is over, they will roll you to something else. And I invite you to try some contemplation, as Alex had just brought up. And so, once you are done listening to our voice, press pause, and then do some contemplation. And so, Alex, imagine our listener, we'll say Linda, that she presses pause. What would you then invite her to do for the next minute or two?
I think what I would ask her to do is, if she's not, or if the person is not comfortable with silence, is to start by having a visual, a visualization of Jesus. What is
Okay.
their image of God? How do they envision God? How do they see God in the person of Jesus? And it can be something as simple as a picture we have or an icon we've seen, but also it can also be a hymn. Find a church hymn that you like and allow that to kind of permeate your mind a little bit until you can find some centering space of some quiet time with God. And a minute can feel like a long time. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to lie. But if you can have an image in your mind that you capture and hold on to and allow to permeate your consciousness there, that's a good start.
That's very good. What if you were to, for the image of this particular episode, I've been looking at various icons of Mary, Martha, and Jesus.
Mhm.
That what if you were to use the icon image so that when somebody presses pause, they can actually just
Yes,
stare?
that will be I will use that as part of the thumbnail for the episode on YouTube and such. So yeah, this is an excellent example. Let me kind of finish with this as we kind of close things out. Trying to be Mary in this situation
Mm-hmm.
is hard.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of pull from Martha saying, why aren't you helping me? Why aren't you engaged with this? And it's not that Mary doesn't engage in any ministry. It's that in this particular moment, this is what's most important. And so I'm not telling people to stop volunteering. But what I'm saying is that being Mary in a Martha world is very, very hard. And you're going to feel like you have failed in those moments where you have tried to contemplate and it didn't happen. God is not asking you to force this. God is just asking you to allow God into your presence. That's all it is. Open the door, let God in, and sit down. That's it. That's all it is.
Good. Trying to live as Mary in a Martha world, and in a Martha economy too, by the way.
Yes.
The economy does not reward people for sitting back and contemplating God. So Mary got to sit at Jesus's feet. We have the pleasure and the ability to have Christ sitting on the throne of our hearts,
Mm-hmm.
inside of us and around us
And in our
and
worship.
through us. Right. And so it's not that you have to fly to Bethany in Israel and find her house and then take a seat there because Christ is in you. Christ is with you. And the closest thing that we have, this doesn't sound very post-Reformation, is the feet of Jesus is the New Testament, is the gospel itself.
Yes.
And um, so just opening up to Genesis chapter 18 and reading about Abraham and Sarah and the visitation of God to their house, that is sitting at the feet of Jesus and listening to how hospitality plays out, and that God ultimately is the one who invites us in, because we to God are not a stranger, and that God welcomes all in. And so, if you want to take a moment once you're done with this podcast to press pause and to just sit and ponder Jesus and having him in your life, then what a great day it will be.
And so we encourage you in your contemplation. And if you have experience with this, or you've had an experience of being in the presence of Jesus, go ahead and share it in the comment section, and we'll try our best to reply there and to share our own.
Yeah, yeah. And then once you're done with all that, get back to work. You know, jump back in. There's always plenty of things to be distracted and worried about. But let us remember that Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her.
Amen to that. And we'll catch everybody in the next one.
God bless.